click subscribe and hit that bell notification. 2 Samuel chapter 10. After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanun, his son, reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. But the princes of the Ammonites said to him, Hanun, their lord, do you think because David has sent comforters to you, that he's honoring your father? Has not David sent his messengers to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? So Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. When it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, remain at Jericho until your beards have grown and then return. So verse 1, it says, after this, the king of the Ammonites died. What is this? So I think the throwback to chapter 9 is that David was showing chesed to Mephibosheth, because the same content is said to be for the king of the Ammonites. That verse 2, David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, because Nahash has dealt loyally with me. That word loyally, it's grace. I will show grace and favor. I will show steadfast love and faithfulness. The word chesed is the same word that was used towards Mephibosheth, that David went out of his way to seek out Mephibosheth's goodwill. He wanted to bless him, the descendant of Jonathan. And now he's looking at Hanun, another young man, generally kind of young. It depends. A king could be 70 and his son could be 40, right? But now he is looking at another man and saying, I want to show him chesed, because he wants to show grace to this man. And so I'd say that it's after these things that David, having shown Mephibosheth so much love and tenderness and faithfulness, his kindness begets kindness. His kindness went from one person to another person. This is very similar to when you pick up a new habit, it's easily expressed towards multiple people. You might have a habit of saying hi to one person, so it's easy to say hi to two people, and so on and so forth. So after these things, after Mephibosheth, David wants to deal with Hanun, the son of Nahash. Now, why does he want to deal with Hanun? Why would he honor Nahash? We don't know when it happened. We don't know exactly what happened, but we know that Nahash had done something kind to David. Now, we'll talk about it later, but Nahash was not a good dude. The Ammonites are not friendly towards Israel. So for David to say that this guy did something for me is a pretty big deal. So David is repaying his debt, so to say. He is looking at the quid pro quo, where the king did something for him. So now he's king. He wants to honor him. He wants to extend a hand of friendship and build a relationship of trust and respect with the Ammonites. And so it says in verse 2, so David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. So what was David's goal? What was his action to express loyal love towards Hanun? So he sends delegates or ambassadors or messengers. And he just says, go and show honor and respect. That's what we find in verse 3. Do you think that David has sent comforters to you, that he is honoring your father? The intention was that that David would honor the death of a king. That the president, when somebody is killed or something bad happens, the president shows up to honor the dead. And in honoring the dead, you know what we do with the living? We comfort them. That's why when we go to funerals, you don't go for the dead, you go to honor the dead, to comfort the living, to see all the people who have shown up, to see the kind words and the gestures and things like that. So David is extending a hand of friendship to the Ammonites, to be more than just what they had in the past, but to be real friends, or at least a acquaintance. So verse 3, what did the princes of the Ammonites say to Hanun? They had evil suspicions. And where there is a lack of love, there is evil suspicions. This is why, on a human level, jealousy is so destructive, because love doesn't carry evil suspicion. And that's what we find. So 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7, it talks about what love is. Love endures, love believes all things, love endures all things. When these princes received David's emissaries, they in themselves have evil suspicions and therefore have no respect and regard for David. They don't give him the benefit of the doubt. They think evil of him because they do not love him. Verse 4, so Hanun took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle of their hips and sent them away. So what were the options that the prince could have done, or the new king of Ammon? Okay, so one of them is kill him. What other options are there? Treat him just like everybody else and ignore, just treat him like their emissary. Or he could humor them and maybe cast a suspicious eye on him and try to get rid of him as soon as possible. Say, hey, thanks for coming, goodbye. Instead, what does he do? And so the court would be full of a bunch of men who had big, full beards. And even if they didn't have big, full beards, genetically, for whatever reason, they would still have a beard of some sort. So if they shave the whole thing off, that's one thing. But to shave half of it is to give them utter contempt, right? It's like taking somebody's shoe. You didn't take both of them, you took one of them. Why would you take one shoe? It's meant to be offensive, disrespectful. And so just as kindness begets kindness, evil suspicion and dishonor begets dishonor. And then they cut the robes at the waist, right? The waist is actually like the love handles, like your belly button. That's why pants used to come up to like your hips. They would be absolutely ashamed and disgraced, and they would parade them out of town and be like, get out of here, you dogs. And their beards would be shaved and their robes are cut off. So this is a huge offense to David and his men. And the king of Ammon did not handle this situation very well, and predominantly because he got bad advice. Now, did his counselors tell him to do this?
Not to the tree, no.
They just planted a seed. And then the tree that grew out of evil suspicion was that of disgrace and dishonor. Now, verse 5, when it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, remain at Jericho until the beards have grown and then return. So David took personal concern for his servants, for his men. He cared about them personally. It sounds like he went there to talk with them. And it's like, you know what? You got new clothes. We can fix that. But your beard, David recognizes the cultural implications, and he doesn't want to shame these men any more than they have to be. They were out to do the king's will. They suffered the consequences. And now the king is saying, I'll shelter you. I'll take care of you. I'll feed you. Give it time. Give it time. Your beards will grow back. It's as if it never happened. Right? This is the assaults and the jeering and the cursing and the insults that people receive are only temporary. It's painful for a moment. It's sorrowful and it's shameful for a moment. But just like the beard grows back, we will grow through it and move on. And the men still had a future. They still had a hope. They still had their king that they could live with, right? That they could still serve him. They weren't permanently cast out, as in being killed or otherwise, right? Verse 6. When the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Beth Rahab and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, and the king of Maacah with 1,000 men, and the men of Tob, 12,000 men. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men, and the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians of Zobah and of Rahab, and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. So, verse 6, it says that this was a stinky escalation. So, the king of the Ammonites walk up and slap David in the face. What does David do? He turns the other cheek. They insulted him by treating his servants this way, and David didn't respond. He was actually very patient, very long-suffering. But then the Ammonites saw that they became a stench. They became foul in the nose of Israel. And so what was their response? They pulled out a gun. They escalated it. It went from smacking David in the face to now threatening him with violence. What is David going to do? He's going to respond accordingly. He's not a coward. By turning the other cheek, he wasn't being a coward. He was being tactful. He was being thoughtful. He was being careful. But now they go and they hire the Syrians, 20,000 people plus 12,000 people plus another 1,000 people. They hired 33,000 people. And they marched out to meet David. So what did David do? David didn't actually go to battle, but he picks up Joab. He says, Joab. He gets Joab and he says, go and meet them in the valley of battle. Now it says in verse 8, and the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate, and the Syrians and of Zobah were with themselves in the open country. So there's a city and there's a gate to that city. Where's the Ammonites? So they're at their city entrance. So if it goes south, what can they do? They can retreat. They can run away. Then you get the other guys, the Syrians and the other kingdoms, I guess. They're on the other side. They're outside the gate. It says that they're out in the open country. And Israel's going to come marching in and get in the middle of them. And they're going to be split. And here's the thing. The Syrians have a chance to escape to the open country. They can run back and get away. The Ammonites can flee to their sheltered city and they can escape. Where can Israel go? They can't go anywhere. They're going to fight two battles, one on this side, one on the other side. And if they try to escape, they'll die. This carries the idea very much of the burn the ships. There's no going back. You either press forward and survive, or you lose the battle and die. And this is the mentality of these groups. You have those who think they have other options. They have other choices. And then there's those who say there's only one option: win. Verse 9. When Joab saw that the battle was set against him both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel, arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in charge of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. So Joab and the people were with him drew near to the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. So Joab has a very difficult decision to make. He has to calculate and determine how to fight two battles at once. He has the Assyrians and he has the Ammonites. So what does he do? Now, it's interesting that he didn't try to divide the force and say, well, like, you take one strong, I'll take one strong. You take one strong, I'll take one strong. He didn't try to divide it equally. He's like, hey, the Syrians, they mean business. I'll take on the Assyrians. I'll take the harder enemy, but I'm also taking our best men. So it's a gamble. Now, what I like about what he says is he says, I will defend you if you need me, and you will defend me if I need you. Now let's go get them. So he divides to conquer, and then he gives a very short word of encouragement where he speaks to the army and he's like, thus and such and this thing. Do you remember in Braveheart where they paint the face? Where he rides back and forth on the horse and he's shouting, rah! That's kind of the idea. He's mustering the troops and he's saying, this is a day of battle. This is going to be important. Let's go get it done. Now, look at what he says in verse 12. Be of good courage and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what seems good to him. So his motivation is for the people of Israel and the cities of his God. He is actually being very religious. And I've never, in all the studying that I've done, I've never seen Joab in this light. Joab's always kind of a problem. He doesn't like to follow orders. He's kind of his own man. He does crazy things, like he killed Abner. So he killed Abner, even though the king didn't want him dead. He's going to kill Absalom, David's son, even though David didn't want him killed. Like, Joab's kind of a loose cannon. But in this moment, you kind of see where he lies, that he is very much a religious person. Now, keep in mind, our idea of religion is very biblical, based on 66 books that God has revealed to us, and they had 5. Maybe 7, right? They maybe had the book of Joshua. And now, here, he is declaring that we are doing this for the honor of God, for the glory of the Lord. 1, for our people, and 2, for the cities that we dwell in that belong to our God. Joab takes this personally. But I think the most important and best part about what he says is he says, let us be strong. Let us do what we do best. Let us fight with all of our fury and push back our enemies and conquer. But may the Lord do what is good in his own eyes. He says, may the Lord do what seems good to him. It's another way of saying, let his will be done. I will build my resume and I will go to school and I will work hard and I'll put my head down and I'm going to put all my energy and effort into being successful, but not my will, let his will be done, is ultimately the conversation that he has with his men. He's like, if today is the day that we fail and we die, let the Lord do what is good to him. But if today is the day that we have victory and we conquer our enemies, let the Lord do what is good to him. And it's that end-all, be-all concept of trusting and believing and having faith in God, is that we will do everything that's within our power and our strength to accomplish what we believe is good and right and true. But when it's all said and done, let his will be done. It's not about us accomplishing our own will. yes, we put our energy and effort into it, but it is about letting God make the decisions about the outcome. That we trust that that is good in his eyes, and we'll be okay with that. Okay, verse 13. So Joab and the people were with him, drew near to battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. That is an understatement. So they went to battle and he won. That's about what we just said right there. Verse 14, and when the Ammonites saw that the Syrians fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. So they retreated, and it was a full surrender. Now it's interesting that the Ammonites saw the Syrians lose, and they lost heart. So they didn't have a lot of courage and a lot of strength in their own abilities. They trusted in somebody else, just like we trust, right? We don't have a lot of faith and courage in our own abilities. We trust in Jesus. Well, they placed their trust in the Syrians. And you know what that turned out to be? Bad faith. That was a bad group, a bad person to put your faith in. And as soon as that person fell, they all retreated. So who we put our faith in and what we put our faith in is very important. And that's why Joab directed his men towards the Lord. And he said, trust in God. Verse 15. But when the Syrians saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. And Hadadezer sent and brought out the Syrians who were beyond the Euphrates. They came to Hilam with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. So these dudes ran away with their tail between their legs. And what was their response? They went to go get their dad. It's like a couple of bullies at school. So you beat up the bully, and the bully goes gets his dad, he's a bully. It's my dad's gonna beat up your dad. So they were ashamed and they were put to disgrace because they fled in battle. Now these dudes are hired soldiers. They're mercenaries. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. This is what they do for a living. They're like, hey, we'll give you $1,000. Will you come fight with us? Oh, okay, let's do it. Like, they didn't think they were gonna go lose. You don't sign up to be a loser. So they lose, they become ashamed, and now the entire host of Syria, they pull them all the way from the Euphrates, right? So we're talking like 100 miles away. They pulled all of their troops from their borders and brought them down and built a massive army. And they're like, we're going to teach you, we're the big kids on the block, and you're not going to come in here disrespecting us. So they come out to fight against Israel. Verse 17, and when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together, and he crossed the Jordan and came to Halem. The Syrians arrayed themselves against David and fought with him, and the Syrians fled before Israel, and David killed of the Syrians the men of 700 chariots and 40,000 horsemen. And he wounded Shobach, the commander of their army, so that he died there. And when all the kings, well, we'll just stop right there. So David grabbed all of Israel and he brought them out. Now, how many people were with David? We don't know how many people were in this battle. How many Assyrians came out? We know how many died. That's it. Now, what's interesting is later on, David's going to get into a lot of trouble numbering his army. He's going to be like, I want to know how strong my arm is. Go number all the men. I want to know how big our army is. And Joab's going to be like, no, let's not do that. The Lord's going to protect us. The Lord's going to provide. We don't need to number it. So it's interesting that now David doesn't care. He's just like, come on, let's go. And he picks up his sword. And everybody's like, all right, let's go. And they just walk on out. They mustered the army and they went out and they fought. All we know is that David took out 700 J.J. Abrams tanks. And he took out 40,000 special forces. That's the idea, that these are monumental tools in battle. To take out a chariot is to take out a tank. To take out a horseman is taking out a highly trained special forces, soldier. David overwhelmingly crushed these guys. That's just the elite that he killed. It doesn't talk about all of the foot soldiers and just people that were killed in this battle. He took out the strong ones, the chariots and the horsemen, and he crushes them so that everybody else becomes afraid. Now, Hadadezer ruled over Damascus and this kind of northern side of Israel, all the way from the Euphrates down to Syria. And David is going to hurt them so bad that there's other kingdoms in that area that were united with Hadadezer. And in verse 15, we're going to find out that they found out that there's a new kid on the block, and he's a whole lot scarier than the bully they once knew. David has conquered the unconquerable. David has overcome these people's strongest defense and also biggest problem for the second time. This is the second time David's crushed this dude. Hadadezer's been hurt before because he came to the rescue of, and then in verse 19, and when all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subjects to them. So the Syrians were afraid to save the Ammonites anymore. They were incapable of protecting themselves and far incapable of protecting anybody else. And so what's interesting is David started out wanting to just be a friend, to be kind, to be gracious. He was misunderstood. He got smacked in the face. Somebody pulled a gun on him and he reacted. He disarmed them and he pushed them down and put them in the dirt. And then they went and they called their dad. And then they came out. And so he stepped up to the plate and he took on the whole world. And he just kicked them in the teeth. And now everybody respects him more. It was not his intention to have war. David avoided war. David was slow to anger. But when push came to shove, he stepped up to the plate and did what was needed, what was required. He responded appropriately. And it happened to be that David responded with an extreme force to put down evil and to put down the opposing enemies. He didn't ask for it and he didn't want it, but he had to do it. And now he's more wealthy, he's more strong, the nation grew and it's bigger. It's very much like that idea of David didn't intend to strengthen himself. He didn't intend to have difficulties and struggles and be stressed out. This sounds easy reading it, but as a king and as a commander, I'm sure David was freaking out. He's like, what do you mean they did that to my servants? What do you mean they're going up in battle array? What do you mean Syria's coming back down again? David had to respond in the face of difficulty by trusting in what God was doing. It wasn't an accident. And now, when he gets to the end of the road, he's better for it. David's entire life has been like that. What do you mean Saul is turning his back on me? What do you mean my wife betrayed me? What do you mean he killed all the priests of Nob? Like, you can just imagine his entire life. What do you mean all of our families got kidnapped? Everything about David's life, he's just constantly caught off guard. But he trusts in God, and every step of the way, God means it for his good intended purposes. So what do you guys think about this text? Okay, so here's a throwback to 1 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. Nahash came out against Jabesh Gilead. This is before Israel had a king. What's his name? Saul had just been anointed publicly. So he wasn't really acting king. This is the first king. They didn't really know what to do with him, so he went home, right? Jabesh Gilead was surrounded by the Ammonites for 5 days, I think it is. And they said, hey, we will make peace with you, but let us find out if somebody will come rescue us. And then Nahash said, I will make peace under these terms. I take your right thumb and your right eye. Why? Why did he want to do that? To shame Israel, to punish you, to make you look foolish. We're taking this entire city, we're going to own you, and we're going to take your right eye and your right thumb. And if nobody can save you, those are the terms of surrender. That is a very bad person. That is a very bad person who at some point did a good thing to David. So David was trying to build a relationship with a bad person. And guess what his son was like?
He's bad.
He shaved their beards and he made them walk around naked. He's a bad dude. These are shameful, disrespectful Ammonites. And David went out of his way to build a relationship with them. And I think the thing that David learned is that bad company corrupts good morals. That bad counsel, bad friendship leads to more harm than no friendship at all. Having no relationship is better than a bad relationship, right? So I don't know why David felt so compelled other than the kindness of the king, because the Ammonites have not been kind to Israel at all. They have not been friendly. They have not been helpful. They have not done anything. But at some point, Nahash did something for David. And that kind of changed David's perspective. And it set him up for this scene. It set him up for his men to die and this world war to begin. My favorite part, Joab's example, we're going to do thus and such, Lord willing. James 4:13, come now, you who say today and tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. It is your boasting. As it is your boasting in your arrogance, all such boasting is evil. For whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So the whole idea is saying, I'm going to make plans and I'm going to do my best to do what I think is right in this life. But, Lord willing, the outcome is not mine to determine. The results are not mine to determine. I trust that His will be done. It's not about me making my future. It's about me doing the best I can, and God will make my future, and He will accomplish His will. Now, David experienced lots of things in his life, and I'm sure this is just one of them, but his motives were questioned. Why are you doing this? You're, just trying to steal money, or you're just trying to be greedy, or you're just trying to do this, or you're just trying to do that. Especially as Christians, when we are out there trying to save the lives of babies, trying to help women, particularly dealing with abortion. Oh my goodness, the amount of slander and corruption of what people think our motives are. Talk about misrepresentation. People think that if you are anti-abortion, you are the devil because your motives are so purely evil. Now, the reality is our motives are pure. We care about those women. We care about those babies and those children and those families so much that we donate, we build centers, we bring in doctors, we bring in resources, we give them booties for the babies, we give them prenatals, we do everything that we can to provide for these people out of love, and yet we are deemed criminals and insane right-wingers. Our motives are fully misrepresented. Now, what we have to remember is that this is no strange thing. People slandered Jesus' motives. People manipulated all the great men of faith in trying to do God's will. They questioned everything about them. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 15, it says that the natural man cannot understand the things of the Spirit. The natural born human being is ignorant and blind and deaf to the things of God. And the spiritual man understands everything. The spiritual man can comprehend, can see clearly, and can hear clearly. And then it says that they judge all things, and they themselves cannot be judged. We cannot be rightly understood. It's not a strange thing. We have to be prepared for it. We have to be ready for it, because a blind man does not understand what you look like. A deaf person doesn't understand what you sound like. To a world of blind and deaf people, you're the crazy one. So it's no shocker that we are misunderstood. But the good thing, like the beard, grows back. You just keep moving on. Now, we are called ambassadors of Christ. We are emissaries of God. We are light set on a hill. We are salt to season the earth. And when God's people are mistreated, when God's people are persecuted, Jesus takes offense at it. Just like David did. David had a personal concern for his men. David wanted to protect his people, to provide for his people. And he went out and he got vengeance. And he obliterated his enemies. And that's what Jesus will do. Let's read 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. Keep in mind, this is why why God says, "Do not avenge yourself, vengeance is mine." We're going to read this, and you can see why we don't have to do anything. God's got this. "This is evidence of the righteousness of God, that you may be considered worthy of the kingdom of God, for which you are also suffering. Since indeed God considers it just to repay with affliction those who afflict you, and to grant relief to you who are afflicted as well as to us, when the Lord Jesus is revealed from heaven with his mighty angels, in flaming fire, inflicting vengeance on those who do not know God and on those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus. They will suffer the punishment of eternal destruction away from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his might, when he comes on that day to be glorified in his saints and to be marveled at among all who have believed, because our testimony to you was believed. To this end we always pray for you, that our God may make you worthy of his calling and may fulfill every resolve for good and every work of faith by his power, so that the name of our Lord Jesus may be glorified in you and you in him, according to the grace of our God and the Lord Jesus Christ." So though we are afflicted, God will bring a rest from that affliction. And though we are misunderstood and hated by this world, just like they hated Jesus, God sees it as a just thing to bring recompense, to repay evildoers for what they have done. And he will smite them with the words of his mouth, and he will cast them into eternal hell. They will receive their due punishment. That's what David knew. He knew that there would be a day when they would get theirs. But he didn't fight to bring that day. He didn't want to create that day, but he will respond on that day. And so Jesus will return, and he will overcome and conquer. And every little thing that we suffer, every little snip here and snip there, every little, for most people, not us, smack on the cheek or loss of the job or abuse, kidnap, murder, they will receive just recompense.